Good evening and welcome to Story Hour. I'm tonight's host, Laura Blackwell. My co-host, the marvelous Daniel Marcus, started Story Hour over 6 years ago to just help us sort of gather around a digital campfire and tell each other stories. And it's been so much fun. We've been coming back to the campfire and making our ritual sacrifices pretty much every Wednesday ever since. Today is actually especially special, today or tonight, depending on where you are, because we have now reached 300 wonderful writers on this show. You know, we have two different ones every night, but sometimes some of them come back, and we've actually gotten at this point to 300 different writers. And that's pretty exciting. Tonight, we even have two writers who you will be familiar with, but they've never been on Story Hour before. Tonight's readers are Jo Kaplan and Angela. Angela, I'm terrible. Is it Slatter or Slater?
I will answer to either.
All right. I'm going to say Slatter because it's easier for me to pronounce that way because that's how it looks to me. But if it's really Slater, maybe she'll just say it herself when I introduce her. And as for you in the audience, welcome back to those of you returning, and welcome to those of you here for the first time. You are in for a treat. If you're here on Zoom, feel free to chime in on the text chat. If you're here on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment or a little thumbs up or something to just tell these writers how awesome they and their stories really are. Sometimes writers don't know. It's sad. But our first writer guest tonight, I can't keep talking. I have to introduce our first writer guest tonight is Jo Kaplan. Jo Kaplan is a Shirley Jackson Award nominated author whose work has been described as addictive, as beautiful and moving as it is creepy by Publishers Weekly, and immersive, chilling, and compelling by Library Journal. She is the author of It Will Just Be Us, When the Night Bells Ring, and The Midnight Muse, as well as numerous short stories. In addition to writing, she teaches English and creative writing at Glendale Community College and is the co-chair of the Horror Writer Association's Los Angeles chapter. Jo, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, we are so excited. So I understand that you're reading us a story that some of us may have seen before, and more of us will be able to get sometime next year in a new collection.
Yes. So I'm going to be reading a story that was originally published in Chromophobia from Strange House Books, edited by Sarah Tantlinger. And the story is also going to appear in my collection that comes out next summer called, the collection is called This Ill-Fitting Skin.
Love it.
So the short story is called Stygian Blue. Shall I begin? Okay. Think of the river. Think of the river's current, fixed and unrelenting, implacable in its refusal to stop or turn. Think of its movement, its unidirectional flow, like time. You can't push back through time like you can't push back through a current. Think of the river behind the Mapletons' farm, bordered on its far bank by the forest. Beyond the chicken coop and the pasture, the river made a natural boundary for the farm, more permanent than any fence. It was a river without a name, and none of the Mapletons had ever followed it far enough to see where it went or where it came from. One can imagine the animals that lived on the farm as they went grazing discovered the river and thirsted. They must have drank its cool lifeblood. This was probably what precipitated all the strangeness with the cows. First, Mr. Mapleton discovered one cow upside down. Not lying on its back, but occupying the same patch of space it would had it been standing up, floating with its hooves in the air and its ears nearly grazing the grass. Mr. Mapleton said he found it on the far end of the pasture, and it reversed direction after only a second or two, so that it once again stood upright. How do we know that's what he really saw? It's possible his eyes were only playing tricks on him. He'd been drinking heavily of late and had just recently turned to hair of the dog to ease his hangovers. His drinking was starting to spill over from one day to the next, poisoning his wife and daughter by proxy. But it wasn't just the upside-down cow. The Mapletons claimed they found another cow split in half down the middle, its two parts separated by no fewer than 15 feet. They saw cows presenting impossible abilities, cows that disappeared and reappeared, cows that seemed to move backwards, cows that briefly doubled before snapping together again. They tried to convince their neighbors, but it was a hard sell. Who would believe in interdimensional cows? At least that was the theory Mrs. Mapleton favored. She trusted her intuition. On the other hand, Mr. Mapleton thought they'd been cursed or were being somehow haunted, which is why Mrs. Mapleton grew fascinated by the cows, while Mr. Mapleton grew ever more irate the more she talked about them. She didn't care that no one believed them. She only wanted to examine them, understand them. He only wanted to escape. A kind of falling away is what happened. Not an argument. Mr. and Mrs. Mapleton simply turned away from each other. None of them really knew what was happening. Not until Anya went for a swim. Anya, 17 and moody to a fault, escaped to the river to breathe out the emotional pollution in every place her parents touched. She towed the water, chilly even in the dead of summer. The sun touched her straw-colored hair done back in a braid and her scattering of freckles. She watched the cows, which were generally behaving like cows again now that her father had begun actively keeping them away from the river. They seemed unharmed by their jaunt into the infinite. She couldn't decide how she felt about it. On one hand, she was defiantly uninterested in comprehending what had made the cows behave so strangely, unlike her obsessed mother. On the other, she refused to be frightened off like her father. Maybe that was why she put on her swimsuit and went out to the river. Her feet seemed all right, so she took another step into the water. Current against her ankles, cloud occluding the sun, all ephemeral and in flux. Then a voice. Her father calling her name the way he did when he was drunk and unhappy. Anya imagined him ripping her away from the riverside with frantic admonitions, accusations of her listening too much to her mother, fear nodding into anger. Silently, she slipped into the water, its shocking cold, and swam down toward the riverbed, wondering how deep it went. Anya Mapleton never hit the bottom. Instead, when she thought she must be getting close, her hands broke through into open air, and she bobbed to a new surface, wondering if she had somehow turned around without realizing it, but feeling deep in her wary heart that this wasn't possible. Before the current could take her away, she swam to shore, pulled herself up the muddy bank, wiping grass from her swimsuit, looked across the forest. But it wasn't a forest. Or it had been once, a long time ago. Now it was only a blackened graveyard of burnt trunks, petrified on an otherwise barren plain. When she looked behind her, she saw the ruins of a farmhouse in the distance, recognized it even in its decay. The wind had battered it near to splinters. No one could possibly live there. Fighting a rising panic that she had emerged from the river somewhere else, Anya noted the reddish cast of the sky all in haze. Unable to stop herself, she looked again at the farmhouse, which was the Mapletons' farmhouse. The severe neglect haunted her with its wrongness. She had grown up in that house. She knew it as she knew herself. What lay at the end of the field, however, was long abandoned, nothing more than a relic. Upon a second look, something appeared to be moving, emerging from the house. A figure, a tall, thin figure, walking towards her. What might be living in that ruined house in this ruined world, Anya could not bear to imagine. She turned and dove into the icy water. All she had to do was swim straight down, and eventually she would re-emerge back home. She decided she would laugh about this someday. She would begin to question whether it had all been her imagination. She would think of it as no more than a dream. All she had to do was swim down. She came up sputtering, blinking water from her eyes, jaw chattering with cold, full of relief and trepidation, one of which would become the other as soon as she was able to get a clear look around. Relief won. There stood the verdant woods, there stood the farmhouse painted blue. Breathing, sighing, Anya looked for her towel but found it must have blown away. Dripping, she crossed the pasture, eager for the comfort of her bedroom, for warmth and dryness and familiarity. She must have been on the other side long enough for Mr. Mapleton to stop calling for her, as she heard no voices. Her swimsuit clung cold to her torso. through the cluttered living room and up the groaning wooden staircase until Anya stood in the doorway of her bedroom but made no move to enter, because she was already in the room. There was the back of her as she sat on the bed facing the window. Sunlight streamed in around the gold edges of her hair. Then Anya on the bed turned her head and looked straight at Anya in the doorway, their cornflower eyes locking. "What are you doing here?" said Anya on the bed, as Anya in the doorway walked backwards, away from here, something terrible lurching up from the depths of her. She stumbled as she approached the stairs, not daring to take her eyes from the doorway as Anya stood from the bed and came around to watch her. She turned and fled down the squealing stairs. She threw herself out the front door. She ran to the river and, not hesitating, dove in, swam down. There were more surfaces of the river and more worlds beyond them. There were more Anyas. There were places without the house or the grass or the trees, places where something white like snow but not cold piled up around the riverbank. None of them was home. She started opening her eyes in the water, attempting to spot the moment when she was no longer swimming down but up. She tried to stop herself at that moment and swim back to the previous shore, but it was impossible. If she stopped too long halfway down, up, the current threatened to drag her away, sending her in a new direction entirely. It was in these moments she forgot which way was up and which was down, and found herself halfway between the two, in a place where the dark danced strangely around her as waves formed in the current. Maybe that's how she would get home, by following the dance of the blue on the black, but still she was afraid to give herself over to the current at the center of the river, the conduit. Finding herself grown too clinical as she experimented with understanding the river, Anya reminded herself not to become too much like her mother. She remembered then to feel fear. For a time this fear consumed her. She wavered at the edge, afraid of the churning endlessness of the river, but also afraid of the uncanny world that was not hers. Not knowing whether to stay in this strange place or leap into the unknown down ever more diverging tributaries. Then she reminded herself not to become paralyzed by fear like her father. Anya jumped. She next emerged beside a ring of proselytizing cows. They bowed before the cow at their center, who seemed to glow. A line of cows with pails in their mouths carried water from the river to the central cow, which elicited a series of gentle moos in what seemed a meaningful pattern. Anya crawled out from the water, ignored, mud caking her feet. The glowing cow pulled her vision to it like a magnet, wonderful and terrible. It drank from the pails set before it. Then it turned its black bovine eyes to her and stared with an alien intensity. Its next moo sounded like a hello. Each cow turned its head to stare at Anya, over a dozen impenetrable gazes fixed on her. She felt scrutinized but not judged, for it was by something other than human intelligence. The glowing cow blinked and said, "You have come from the river." "Where am I?" Anya finally shouted. "What the fuck is happening?" She felt she could not swim anymore and fought back the burn of her eyes, the exhaustion of her body, bits of wet grass in her hair. "You are here," said the cow unironically, even as Anya thought how unhelpful an answer it was. "But what is it?" she asked, staring into the blue water in constant motion as an evolving wave expressing itself differently at each point in time. Always moving, but impossible to navigate or control. "The river is like an artery," said the cow. "The hell does that mean?" "Think of it like a nerve in the cerebellum of the universe," said the cow. "It drank from the pails, taking the river into itself, into the rivers of its brain, making more and more of itself the wave that moved the river." "How do I get back home?" Anya asked, while pretending to ignore the absurdity that she was conversing with a cow. "I do not know the way," said the cow. "The river does not move backwards." "I don't need to go backwards. I just need to go through." "Through," contemplated the cow as it emptied a pail. Its eyes seemed to effervesce a strange dark hue, and its flesh rippled or vibrated. "Through. Ah, yes, you go through. All the way through. And what do you see?" Now the cow seemed to be speaking gibberish, or at least in phrases Anya could not follow. She shook her head. She didn't know. "Stygian Blue!" the cow shouted, or mooed in something resembling a shout. "Stygian Blue! Stygian Blue! Then the cow burst into a billion glimmering pieces that burned themselves out on the air. Having witnessed this dissolution, the rest of the cows fixed their black stares upon Anya as she stumbled back into the river, glided to the middle of the river, and swam down. and down, and down. The river seemed deeper here. She reached a layer of midnight divorced from the sun at either or any side of the river. She wondered what might happen if she turned and swam along that layer of darkness, turned away from up or down and towards a new direction. What if she kept going forward, but there wasn't another surface for her to find? What if she drowned in the endlessness? The current pushed her gently to that deeper darkness, but she resisted, swam forward, and up. She coughed and gasped at the surface, her limbs trembling with fear and cold and exertion. Sunset promised twilight in its rosy hues. Here the woods encroached on either bank. Barefoot she crept among the trees for sign of life, stepping on nettles, swatting the buzz of mosquitoes. Darkness thickened under the canopy. She thought of her parents. By now, Mr. Mapleton would have realized Anya was no longer there. His calls would echo empty on the wind, unreturned. Maybe he would find her towel and shoes and jean shorts folded in a neat pile beside the river, and he would know where she had gone. But he would be too afraid to go in after her. Perhaps he would tell Mrs. Mapleton, and she would decide to leap in after her daughter. Would she follow the same path as Anya, or emerge from other surfaces even stranger? Would she become irrevocably lost, never to find her way back home? She tried not to think of these things, and soon she came upon an angular hut set crooked between trees. Rough, simple, built by hand. Leaf-laden branches shivered above it. Orange glowed from the solitary window, the kind of orange that shivered. Like a witch's shack in a fairy tale, Anya thought. But it was this, alone among the trees and nothing more. Nowhere else to go. Nothing but ever-darkening forest and the river behind her, always rushing, always moving. She knocked on the door. When it opened, she felt the dry heat of a fire which turned the woman in the doorway to a dusky silhouette. "I can smell the river on you," said the woman. "Come in." Grateful and ashamed, Anya followed her into the hut to sit beside the crackling fire. Animal hides hung on the walls. A small skinned creature roasted on a spit above the flames, smelled of bubbling fat and sweet meat. Her stomach grumbled. Only when she felt the deep ache of cold begin to recede did she look up at the woman who lived here. The woman had no eyes. Anya's heart lurched up her throat, but she could not tear herself from the fire to return to falling darkness and icy water, could not allow herself to be frightened off so easily from warmth and light. The woman regarded her with gaping holes in her freckled face, her hair stringy. She tore a piece of meat from the spit with soot-blackened fingers and chewed, swallowed. "What is this place?" Anya asked. The woman considered. "I don't know. It's only where I washed up. The river goes on for miles and miles. I think maybe it goes on forever." Anya shivered. Wind creaked through the cracks in the hut, and the trees outside rustled with the voices of multitudes. "You've been through the river," the woman said. Realizing the silence of her nod, Anya said, "Yes. What happened to you?" "I went through the river too," the woman said. She tore off another piece of meat and handed it to Anya, who could not help but take it. She bit. It was tough and chewy. "Years ago, I went for a swim, but I got lost." The woman's mouth hung open like the wounds of her eyes where darkness danced. She stepped closer. "Stay here. Don't go back in." Anya recoiled. "What? I can't stay here." "It's no use," said the woman, every bit of her gaping open so that Anya felt she could see too much of her insides, too much of what ought never be shown to the world. "If you go back in, you'll tire, you'll be swept away. Don't look at the river's bottom." Anya frowned. "I thought it had no bottom, since you always come out the other side." "Oh," said the woman, chuckling, "it has a bottom. The river is deeper than you can imagine, but it has a bottom, if you swim long enough." Despite herself, Anya felt her mother's curiosity prickling through her. "What's at the bottom?" The eyeless woman pulled a chair beside her and sat, reached forward to touch Anya's hands, brought her mouth close to Anya's ear, whispered, "Stygian Blue." Anya tried to pull away, but the woman's grip tightened on the bones of her wrist. "What's Stygian Blue?" The woman's lips pulled into a grin around rotting teeth. "A forbidden color. Something we're not meant to see." Then she laughed, a mad sound like the shouting cow. With an almighty tug, Anya pulled herself away, overturning the wooden chair which cracked against the floor. She rolled free of the woman's reach, trying not to look up into the darkness, swimming in her empty sockets, dark and blue, and with splinters in her stinging feet, she stumbled back against the wall as the woman turned one way and then the other, searching for her. Then, as if she had forgotten Anya altogether, the woman turned away, stoked the fire, took the roasted creature from the spit, ate more meat, humming to herself all the while. Anya stood silent in the corner, watching. By turns, the woman added words and odd cackles to her humming. Anya recognized the tune as something she had listened to as a child, but she did not recognize the lyrics the woman added. I can't see me and I can't see you, she sang as she walked around the hut with her hands out, feeling her way to the table where she set down the meat. Observing her from the corner, Anya realized the woman could not be much older than herself. She even had the same straw-colored hair. Gazing about with her black sockets, she sang, All I see is Stygian blue, Stygian blue, Stygian blue. Anya took a step, but her shifting weight made the floor groan. The woman stopped singing. Who's there? She called sharply. Holding her breath, Anya took another step, slow, ghostly. The woman turned her face this way and that. I can smell the river on you, she said. 3 more steps to the door. Anya wanted nothing more than to be out of this hut and away from the woman with no eyes. You'll see, the woman muttered as Anya reached the door, though whether she was talking to Anya or herself she couldn't say. Night had fallen. Blue gloom shrouded the clicking, rustling sea of trees. Anya did not want to find out what creatures roamed the eternal forest, so she picked her way over brambles and roots until she saw the rippling river gleaming silver in the moonlight. She sat on the bank, hissing at the chill when she tested the water. A chasm of melancholy opened up inside of her. She wondered what was the point of continuing to swim from one surface to another. She wondered what was the point of even trying to get home, to a home where she was ignored or berated. She wondered if her parents were even missing her, or if they were simply going about their lives growing ever more remote. Perhaps she ought to leap into the river and simply let it take her away. She stood and dove into the sparkling water, and when she reached that no man's land between up and down, she drifted with the current, let it pull her away from up or down and into the deeper dark, let her limbs float and her body tumble, became part of its movements. When she had attuned herself to the rhythm that guided the river, she added her own movements and started to swim, not up or down or even sideways, but deeper, towards the bottom. She opened her eyes. She exhaled a tiny stream of bubbles that disturbed the dark. Then she saw it. The blue. The blue as dark as the black, like seeing color while blind. Figures crawled and swam at the river bottom like scavengers, figures of Stygian blue which morphed and twisted in the current, with the current, part of the river or maybe its natural inhabitants. She decided she would not be afraid. The figures found her, took hold of her. She was not supposed to be here. Her presence at the bottom of the river violated the universal wave. Her lungs burned, and she saw the shape the river made as if from above, the same shape the waves made in the water, a shape that turned in on itself again and again like a Mobius strip. Lungs ached, could no longer hold back. She breathed in. Icy water filled her chest. She was on fire. She felt the blackest blue, the bluest black, race through her arteries like ink. The police fished Anya Mapleton's body out of the river 6 miles downstream. The coroner declared it an accidental drowning. The one thing no one could explain was how her body had vanished from the morgue. One moment it was there, and the next it was gone. Just before it disappeared, the diener, who had been cleaning the autopsy tools, glanced over at the corpse and saw its blue eyes open and staring. He came closer, and Anya Mapleton, who was definitely dead, looked right at him with pupils that expanded and expanded, black into the blue. He leaned closer, mesmerized by those eyes, by the way some deeper, darker blue was dancing in the black. Her gray lips moved slightly, a song whispering between the tiniest possible breaths. He leaned closer, listened. All I see is Stygian blue, the corpse sang, almost inaudible. Stygian blue, Stygian blue. After the body disappeared, the diener quit and supposedly has not been seen since. The end.
Oh, that was awesome. I like it even better having you read it. You have such a wonderful sort of, I want to say matter-of-fact delivery, and I hope you understand that I don't mean that that means expressionless. I mean that it just seems very, very honest and straightforward and just like there could not be a word there that's not true.
Thank you. It felt like a campfire story, I realized as I was reading through it, and I think that's kind of the vibe I was feeling. So
Yes, and
I was
knowing,
groping for that kind of description, but that really fits it exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
that wonderful nightmarish, slightly undefinable feeling. Oh, it's so good. Oh, thank you.
and as I finish reading, it gets darker and darker in the room that I'm in.
And here too, because I'm next to the window. So it is our way at Story Hour to just take a moment between the stories and let the first one soak in and ready ourselves to put the next paint on our palette, as it were. So I just take a breath. And now I'm ready for another story. Everybody, that was Jo Kaplan in her Story Hour debut. And our next reader is also a Story Hour debut. It is Angela Slatter. Slatter? Is it really Slatter or Slater?
Slater. My family say Slater because I had a very insistent grandmother who used to walk around telling people it was with the accent on the A, but if you obey the rules of English language with two T's, it's Slatter. But I think we all just go with Slater because we don't want to get haunted by grumpy granny. So
that's fair.
Yeah.
I think that if there's any word that can defy the rules of spelling and grammar in any language, it's names, because names are their own language.
Yeah.
And
but I will answer to either, so I'm not fussy.
That is great to hear, but I do not want to upset your granny either.
Good choice.
Granny. Sure, you were right. So Angela Slatter, also known as A.G. Slatter, is the author of 8 novels, including The Path of Thorns, The Briar Book of the Dead, and A Forest Darkly, 12 short story collections, 6 novellas, over 200 short stories, 2 books on having a writer career, and a Hellboy universe graphic novel collaboration with Mike Mignola. Her writing awards include a World Fantasy, a British Fantasy, a Shirley Jackson, and 8 Borealis Awards. Her work's been optioned for film and TV and translated into multiple languages. Her next book will be the novella Fitcher's Bird, which is, I must editorialize, the title of the absolute freakiest variation on the Bluebeard myth. And
yes,
that is saying something. And when the camera's back on Angela, I hope you'll hold up that cover again. It's going to be freaky. Her next book will be the freaky novella Fitcher's Bird, released in October 2026. Angela, welcome to Story Hour.
Thank you for having me. It's so exciting.
It's very exciting for us. Now, please do show that cover that you were holding up while I was talking.
I'll do. There you go. Beautiful cover from Titan. And if you
perfect, it's not reversing.
There's a red fleck through the black, which is so beautiful, which I hadn't sort of noticed until I got it in the mail the other day.
Some of the feathers are foil. I can see they're shimmering.
Yeah, there's just a little bit of like a cellar glaze on it, so it's got that.
Oh, it's not foil.
Yeah,
it's better.
No, it's not foil. It's just a glaze kind of thing.
It's almost like a grackle feather.
Yeah, it looks amazing. So I've been very lucky with my Titan covers. So,
and tonight we're lucky because you're going to read us a story.
I'm going to read you a story. I'm going to read you The Red Forest. So we're on theme with forests this evening. This is from Winter Children, which is an older collection from Brainjar Press. And it's one of those stories that I don't think many people know it, but it's one of my favorites because I think I wrote it in a single sitting. So, and that's a miracle in itself. So it has to be a favorite story.
Wonderful. So, yes. Please.
Thank you. The church behind the house is deserted, neglected, and has been for some time. It's made of wood that is bowed and splintered, silvered by the elements. Truth be told, thinks Dina, the one a little way down the road near Yolkov's farm isn't in much better repair nowadays, even though it's newer. Mind you, no one uses that one anymore either, only occasional tramps, scouting parties, and the like. It's simpler than the great ones across the border, with their bright colours and cupola-topped towers. This one is an immigrant's church, made without much money, but with much devotion. 3 levels and a tall spire, the onion dome unadorned. Uncle Abram, he said it used to be covered in gold once when it was first raised, but Uncle Abram also used to keep pigeons in there before he died. After he died too. Dina still sometimes sees him, or what's left of him, tending to the birds that have stayed. The ones that are getting old have lost their sense of direction or simply can't be bothered going anywhere else. He's a kind of silver grey now, Uncle Abram, as he flits around the disused machinery and the rusting truck bodies that gradually replace the pews. He's less substantial than he was in life, which is some achievement since he was as thin as a twig then. Aunt Varvara used to say, when she still had the wherewithal to say anything, that he'd end up in the next town over if a strong wind blew through. Of course, she's gone too, Aunt Varvara, carried off by the sickness that swept through the valley, one of the first to go despite the deal she'd struck, despite thinking she could ward it all off. They'd found no hope in the light, been offered no deliverance despite all their prayers, all that wasted time spent on their knees in the church, all the tiny, bloody sacrifices that brought them nothing. In the end, salvation of a sort had come from the very darkness itself. Dina can hear the distant growl of tanks as she washes her lonely cup and bowl. The coffee and porridge were unsatisfying, even tinged red as they were with the last of her supplies. The soldiers are coming because they're always coming, crossing borders that shift from one day to the next, taking and losing countries that have their names changed without warning. Dina's not sure what her nation's called anymore. Yes, the soldiers are coming, but it's still far off. Dina can tell by the sound, the echoes and rumbles, the way the air trembles only a little. They'll be searching, no doubt, for others. She still has time. She climbs the stairs to the attic room she used to share with her cousins. It's been all hers for a while now. The dress is laid out on the bed that once accommodated 4 girls of various heights and girths. Irina and Clara were no trouble, but Zoya took up a lot of space. Farted a lot too. Were she to be truthful, Dina would say she wasn't entirely unhappy to see the back of Zoya when her time came, to see her buried in her own white dress with the tiny purple flowers she'd insisted on embroidering. She had a fine hand, did Zoya, for such things. The other girls had begged her help, and she'd agreed in return for their share of dessert for 6 months, back when there were still such luxuries to go around. Irina and Clara had readily agreed. They were used to such bargains with their sister. As her daughters disappeared one by one, Aunt Varvara drew closer to Dina. She'd always been fond of her niece, her dead brother's orphaned child. When it came time for Dina's white dress, Aunt Varvara had done most of the sewing, even though tradition decreed a girl should make her own wedding gown. She'd done it in spite of Dina's illness, in spite of all the predictions that the girl would not live past her 16th birthday, that no man would have such a sickling to wife, that she wouldn't be able to provide children, sons, wouldn't be able to keep a house. Any man who married Dina would find himself tending her as if she were a child, and he would be unmanned by nursing. No man, no husband would choose that. Dina didn't care about the dress, indeed had no skills for such a thing, even if she desired it. But Varvara wouldn't have a bar of her protests, nor anyone else's naysaying. She constructed the gown at night, sat Dina beside her, made her sew the seams, the parts inside where no one would look, so that the girl's hands at least touched the frock and made some contribution to its birth. But all that fancy work, all the complicated frilling and shirring, embroidery and fitting, All of that was Varvara's genius. Once upon a time, there would have been so many bright colours, so much embroidery and so many hues, an outfit of festive wedding wealth with a headdress to bend a bride's neck. But Western bridal magazines, stolen, traded, fought over, had brought new ideas, encouraged the old customs to be put aside. This gown is entirely white, even the hand-stitched flowers, picked out in expensive silk thread that Dina's mother had set aside so many years ago, and which Varvara had rescued from the burning house, along with Dina. Of course, after ascertaining that her brother and sister-in-law were beyond help, she'd kept it secure for her niece. Dina stares at the dress affectionately, remembering the nights by the fire with her aunt, remembering with a fondness she did not feel at the time, each pinprick, each hand slap for her carelessness. She recalls instead that her aunt believed she, Dina, would survive, would live and thrive, and would need just such a dress. She reaches out, but her fingers don't make contact with the fabric. Not yet. Instead, she looks to the window with its diamond-shaped panes, again towards the old church. Its unhealthy slant has become worse, if she's not very badly mistaken. It was such a beautiful thing, even with the glass gone from the frames and the endless trailing lace of bird shit streaking from the onion dome down the spine and the walls. The wooden tiles look like dragon scales or aggressive nettle leaves. Either way, they bristle, defensive about their parlous state. But it is old, past its time, and not everything gets to live on and become something new. She can see the luminous flicker that is Uncle Abram, passing back and forth in front of the empty casements, somehow with birdseed held in his ephemeral hands. No point in saying goodbye. He won't hear her or see her, or he'll pretend he doesn't, which is much as it was when he breathed. Dina misses Aunt Varvara, though, and wonders why, of the two of them, she wasn't the one to come back. Even if only to nag Dina about brushing her hair and making sure her skirt was properly pressed and tucked into her skirt. Beside the building is the graveyard. So small it seems hard to believe how many bodies it swallowed. Dina had nursed Abram and Varvara, her cousins, and more than a dozen of their nearest neighbours. At first she'd had help, but eventually there was no one else left. People had come to the Kozlov farm in search of aid. At one point there'd been 10 invalids on makeshift beds in the living room and the kitchen, but they grew sicker still. They'd found not a cure, just a kind hand to tend them as they died. Surely, thought Dina, such a thing was not to be sniffed at. As with the nursing, there'd been aid to start with when the cycle turned to burying. But as folk sickened, they lost both the will and the ability to swing a shovel, and she was left alone to do the interments. The last couple, Dina had to admit, weren't too deep under the sparse new grass. She was healthier, stronger by then, and her hands had toughened, the palms no longer blistering from the spade's handle. However, she just didn't have the energy to go down the 6 feet that Father Gribov had insisted on before he got too ill to do anything but shit in his sheets. He'd been the last one she'd planted, had encouraged him on his way with a pillow over the face when he was too weak to protest, too weak to do anything but tell her that she was a bad person, evil and damned, that her aunt had been the same. He wasn't a pleasant man. There was nothing kindly or generous or forgiving about him. She used to think he wasn't a good churchman, dominating the valley folk from the tiny church down the road, the one where the walls didn't bow, the ceiling didn't house pigeons, where the windows were still intact. But nowadays Dina suspects he was precisely that, a very good churchman, just not a good human being. Maybe that was why his religion failed him and failed all of them. Or perhaps his flock had simply been trained to believe kindness wasn't to be expected of God. Perhaps that was why, when Varvara brought them her solution, they took the hand that was offered, no matter that it was blackened and bore nails that might be mistaken for talons. Perhaps when you see death coming, you'll do anything to avoid it and not be too picky about the details. Dina's eyes drift to the other grave, the one that's just outside the graveyard's low iron fence. This one was buried well. Dina had not taken part in this one. She'd been still recovering, lying in the bed in the attic, though she propped herself up that night, watched through the window as they interred the old woman by torchlight, as they dug deep, deep down to make sure she stayed where she was put. Dina's fingers are thin, the nails sharper than they used to be, her skin rougher. As she undoes her blouse, the cicatrix on her chest is exposed, one button at a time, seemingly such a small action to show such a dreadful trauma. Red, thick, raised, almost new enough that she can see the thin line where the cut was made, so fine a slice to have produced such a large scar. She'd been given some of Aunt Varvara's poppy milk to make her sleep that night, but sometimes she's sure she remembers the sensation of that incision, of the creaking farm implements repurposed to spread her ribs wider and wider. Some days they still ache. The feeling of Aunt Varvara's small fingers, tiny palm, closing around her heart. The old woman had come to them, wandered out of the forest that backed onto the Kozlov farm. She'd knocked at the door, begged food, drink, eyed Dina, who'd risen from bed only to recline on the threadbare sofa by the fire, pale and wasting as her heart unhurriedly betrayed her. The old Baba ate slowly, mostly gumming the fresh bread Aunt Varvara gave her, dipping it into the warm milk as if it wasn't soft enough, as if it wasn't the only thing they had to offer. Food was scarce by then everywhere, yet they gave of what they had. Dina could see that the old woman's distaste annoyed her aunt, but Varvara was smart enough not to make complaint. No good ever came of upsetting forest wives, which is why they'd welcomed her into their house, even as the tales of sickness, coming closer, swept in on the breath of travellers and traders, even though their friends and family had already begun to decrease in number. The Baba's skin was a mass of crevices, as if she'd been the site of some dreadful geological event. Her hair was black but wiry and bushy beneath the red scarf. Her eyes were also black, but sometimes in the light of the fire, Dina thought there might be an undercurrent of yellow, like piss or spite. She wore so many skirts and shawls that it was impossible to know what shape she was beneath them all. A riot of colours once, now faded and muted by time and dirt. When Aunt Varvara went outside to hang the washing, the old woman sidled over to Dina, sat at her feet, felt the toes beneath the blanket to see how cold they were. "How long do you have, girl?" she croaked. Dina shrugged. "I don't know." "How long have you been dying?" "Forever," said Dina. The old woman grunted. She put a hand against the girl's chest, and Dina was too weak to shake her off, too tired to shout for Varvara's help. But the crabbed digits with their swollen knuckles and sharp nails went no further, did nothing but lay against the place, where Dina's heart gave its lethargic lub-dubs. Then the old woman nodded again, grunted again, and took her fingers away. "My heart," she cackled. "My heart is strong, so strong. It's my body that's giving up. Now the body is sound, but that treacherous heart is going to kill you." Dina hadn't answered, just stared into the flames of the hearth. When Aunt Varvara returned, the old woman rose and went to her, spoke low, coaxed her to a corner of the kitchen where Dina could not hear them. Her aunt's voice never rose in either anger or hope or fear, but when Varvara came to her a few hours later, having done the rounds of the valley with the old woman in tow, she was pale and exhausted looking, lines drawn on her face that had never been there before. And then she told Dina what the old woman, the Baba, had proposed, what the folk of the valley had agreed. Dina touches the scar. The raised red flesh still feels hot, But perhaps that's because she was so used to bad circulation all her life, to the cold. The new heart pushes blood around her body as the old never did. Varvara had taken the woman's offer, thinking to save her niece and all those who starved and sickened around them. That the Baba's gift might stop their crops from failing, their children from dying, the soldiers from marauding and taking whatever tiny scraps of value might be left to them. Varvara had sought some kind of safety, although Dina didn't think her aunt truly knew, or properly bargained for, what shape that might take. Death, Dina had thought at the time, was a form of safety, yet she didn't know if the idea was hers or the Baba's. But there was a greater price to be paid than just the body of a sick girl. Of course there was. Though the crops began to revive, the sickness kept eating away at the valley folk, and by the time they realised it, the old woman was dead and gone, beyond any kind of retribution. Soon Varvara was gone too, wondering with her last breath what she'd done. Ultimately it took them all except Dina, the girl with the Baba's heart. When Dina was at last alone, the soldiers came. A big group that time, not just one or two strays, deserters or scouts. Whatever had been happening in the world beyond the valley had at last seemed fit to pour into it. When those men came and saw there was no one but Dina, they thought she was easy meat. She wasn't fully healed. She was tired and hungry, but the Baba's appetites were strong and growing stronger. There was Dina's body, the Baba's heart, and a ruthless pragmatism binding them together. Her nails had grown long and sharp like the old woman's had been. So sharp that she'd sliced open Dina's chest and her own with one of those talons, so that Aunt Varvara could pull the heart from each and swap them over. No clever surgery necessary. The Baba's magic ensured her heart took to the new body. It didn't matter what Dina's cold organ did in the Baba's worn-out corpse. The soldiers had thought to chase her, hunt her through the woods, but she led them a merry dance, had picked them off one by one. She drew out the game, then hung them in her larder when she'd done, knowing they'd stay fine and fresh in the cold air. What she took from those men, old and young, had helped sustain her, helped to heal her, helped make the raw cut in her chest close over faster. She knew more would come, but she knew she had some time. Today, however, they have come. Dina dresses in her white dress, thinks of Aunt Varvara's kind hands pulling it together, making it so very lovely. It's not a wedding dress, no, but something so much better, a coronation gown. Dina walks through the forest, beneath the trees, festooned with crimson flesh and white bones. The red drip drops onto her snowy dress, hitting with strange precision only the embroidered silken flowers, so it appears as though they're blossoming on the skirt, the bodice, the sleeves. The blood from the soldiers who came before, blood that should not run any longer, liquefies and falls like a benediction. It makes a plink as it hits, softer on the fabric than on the rock or skin or the puddles of water where winterfall has melted. It's not the only sound. Behind her comes a cacophony of more men, more soldiers, many more than last time. She's not quite strong enough to face them all, not yet, but she's cunning and she's fast. She knows these trails better than any living being. She'll leave them far behind, find the spot deep in the red forest where a tiny house awaits, made of wood, its legs those of chickens, so it can rise and walk if required. She'll know it, if the chicken legs aren't enough, by the skulls that hang on the porch, their eyes bright with flame as they watch who comes and screams warnings to Baba Yaga. The mortar and pestle are just down the path, hidden, waiting. She'll hike up her skirts and climb aboard, take hold of the pestle in her thin, strong hands. The vessel vehicle will know which way to go. Dina will warm her new home, kindle fire in its hearth. She'll rest, grow strong, become acquainted with who she is now, with both of herselves. Then, when she is ready, she'll venture out. She'll find more soldiers and others like them. She'll find all she needs out in the world that's just waiting for a new God.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All in one sitting, huh?
Yeah. It's very rare for that to happen.
Oh yes. Oh yes. And it just, wow. What kind of mood were you in when you wrote it, if I may ask?
I was thinking about wars and invasions and how the fate of nations changes with someone's whim, generally an old guy who feels greedy on a Tuesday. The idea of borders too. Gavin Grant's got a story, and I cannot remember the name of it, but it has that idea of if it's Tuesday, we must be this country. If it's Wednesday, we're probably this country, kind of thing. And I thought that was just a really interesting idea to play with. That borders aren't drawn generally by the people who live in the country. As someone in a capital, or not even your own capital half the time. And I am a huge fan of Baba Yaga. I've written her a few times, and that was the second time I wrote her, I think. I had another one called The Bone Mother. But I always think about her. She's not actually a villain. She's a figure who gives you choices. And she wants you to make a good choice, make better choices. Most people don't. So
True.
and you have the idea of everything costs, so survival still costs. And I was thinking about this girl, everything's stripped away from, to her essence, and then you put another personality in on top of that. So what happens to her? So I wasn't in an especially bad mood. I was just being a writer.
It's wonderful.
Thank you.
When I write stories that in a sitting, they're generally shorter, and I call them rage blossoms because I write them because I'm angry.
Yes.
So I was wondering if it was anger with you too, but it sounds like you also have more going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot happening there, and it's just, I think it was more just a terrible sadness of what happens, and how do you fight against it? I don't know what it is.
And you want to be happy for Dina, but you really can't be.
No, there's been a lot going on.
No, which doesn't mean that we should give up. It just means that the more every day more we have of war, the worse it is.
Yeah. No.
That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
These stories were so different, and yet I feel like there was such an undercurrent running through them.
Yep.
A feel of, and I think it was partly stylistic. They both had a very told feeling. Like Jo said that she felt like her story was a campfire story, and this had a little bit of a fairy tale feel to it.
Yeah.
And yet they also had some pretty clear modern markers, which always makes it a little bit scarier.
I think that we still have that connection, and that the moment you're sitting around a campfire, even if you've got your motorhome behind you or your super special tent, you're still tapping into something that's just so old. And there are ancestors sitting behind you, also thinking, but you've got this amazing motorhome. Why are you sitting out here in the cold?
And maybe the ancestors saying, "You've had all this time. We all tried so hard. Haven't you learned yet?"
Exactly.
You're still not taking care of each other.
Oh, yeah. But no, I really enjoyed yours, Jo. It was amazing, I think. And I think it was a great flow to, across those stories.
Thank you. I agree. That was such a cool pairing to have no communication beforehand
Yeah.
about what we were picking and
It's-
have this kind of vibe emerge between them. I thought was very cool.
Yep.
It
Awesome.
was,
Yeah, it sometimes just works that way.
Yep. Oh, it was great. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
it really does feel magical when it works this well. So,
Awesome.
yeah. Awesome's a good word for it.
Yep.
Thank you. And well, Daniel and I will be back next week. It will be completely different because every week is completely different, but also awesome. Next week, our awesomeness is coming courtesy of Lauren Parker and Wole Talabi, who will be our readers. I always recommend checking storyhour2020.com to see about any changes, check the upcoming calendar, maybe check the list of recordings. You can also just go straight to the YouTube channel, Story Hour 2020, and browse to your heart's content. Over 300 different story hours, over 300, at least 300 writers now, period. And watch any you may have missed. Watch this one a few more times. Whatever you feel is correct in the moment. Jo Kaplan, Angela Slatter, thank you so much for a really enchanting story hour.
Thank you for having us.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Well, I hope you'll both come back again. You were both wonderful. Thank you also to SIFWA for the Givers Fund grant that helps us keep the Zoom room open. And thank you to Daniel Marcus, without whom this Zoom room would not even exist. And thank you to all of you who are here watching now in the moment, all of you who are watching at some point in the future, because I really believe that as long as we all watch this same story hour and enjoy these same stories, we're all just running our fingers through that same silvery river, and none of us are going to look down.